What's up, everyone? Carmen here with Pittsburgh White Shorts, bringing you another deck tech. Today, I want to talk about NIKKE, specifically Door Standby NIKKE. And although a lot of people have probably already talked about it, I think it's important to cover sort of what I would bring to a tournament if I was playing NIKKE, because it is a very control-y deck, kind of in the more traditional card game sense of the word, where you can actually shut down a lot of what your opponent is trying to do, no matter what kind of deck they're playing, and that's really unique in Weiss. That doesn't usually happen. That's usually not how defensive decks play. They usually just kind of put up walls, and NIKKE does do that, but NIKKE has unique tools to kind of shut people down, very powerful single tech cards, very good access to them, very good ability to recur them. So I definitely wanted to cover it going into the continuing Summerfest season for trios, because it's definitely a deck people are going to pull out, definitely a deck you're going to see, and you need to be prepared for it. Looking at all the cards here, my list might be a little bit different than what you expect to see, and that's because I really like to lean into those very powerful anti-tech cards that you can use to control the game, because that's what NIKKE is really, really good at. There's some notable exclusions. I know a lot of people play that Twin Driver. I think that card sucks. I'll get into why. But the core here is going to be pretty much the same. So let's just jump right into the card by card and run these down. We're going to start off here with 4 stacks of our level 0 sort of attacking cards. The first one's going to be the Tia Chiuri. This is a true Chiuri, so you can grab any NIKKE character off that top 4 when she hits the waiting room after you discard a card, and she can't side attack, not really a big deal. The Scarlet is going to be our Clock Plus. This comes from the TD. When you play her, she gets 500 times the number of cards in your clock, and then her other effect, which is also on play, you clock the top card of your stock. So that first card in your stock, put it right into your clock, and then you get to look at up to 6 cards at a character, and then top 2 rearrange. Never forget the top 2 rearrange. We joke that it is quote-unquote secret text because a lot of people forget, but it's a really awesome part of the card. That top 2 rearrange, even in the early game, since you are playing standby, can help you sequence your triggers so you don't bury a climax first attack, things like that. Also worth noting, you are kind of dual color at level 1, so if you play this going into level 1 and you know what the card in your stock is, this can help you quote-unquote set color if you use your memory. I know that's a forbidden skill, remembering things, but if you do that, you can leverage that to get a little bit of extra clock information, maybe put an important card in clock for later if you know where you paid it down at your level 0. That's just a lot of raw deck speed. If you resolve one of each of these, you've milled 10 cards outside of any other processing that you've done on your first deck. That's a lot of first deck speed, so that we can get into our compressed next decks. Getting into 2 cards that are a little bit more intricate in how they are used are this Rappy and this Maiden. NIKKE Door Standby is a deck that rotates its back row. If you've never played a deck like that in White Shorts, what that means is that you are going to be moving cards forward and backward from your backstage to your front and back to perform your effects, and then those cards are going to clear themselves off the board, either off an effect like Rappy, where when you play a climax, you can bounce it back to your hand, or the Maiden, which is a helmet. She sacks herself up the field. You can use these to play cards with 4 or more conditions multiple times on your turn, mess around with how you're going to juggle your Jackal Brainstorm, which is a big part of the deck, as well as just free up spots for standby as you move into the late game. So the Rappy here, we're playing 4 of it because this is really what makes the deck tick. It's what makes it very, very consistent. You got that constant filter with her first effect, where as long as you have 2 or more other characters, you on play, draw, drop. That helps get you into your unsearchable, really big event, that 3-0 event, that tap counter, which is a super scary thing that NIKKE has in its back pocket. Those little bit of extra draws, considering you're going to play this maybe 1 or 2 times a turn, means that you're absolutely going to get into your 2-0 over the course of the game. And then, of course, just being able to filter your heavy cards that you never want to play from hand, that you want to put out with standby when you already have the standby in your hand, or maybe you draw it off the top, and you can just filter something out there and set yourself up for your turn. Her bounce back effect is also super relevant in the deck in terms of what it gives. It gives you on attack choose trigger and a little bit of extra power, extra 1,000. So that choose trigger works really well with Modernia to make sure that you can hedge your bets on getting that extra stock. If you hit a 2 or higher card on top, you can send it to stock and then proceed with your trigger. So she can plus you and give you stock. Rappy helps get you there. As well as, of course, just setting up your triggers going into the late game. The main I already mentioned is Helmet, but it also has a field disruption effect. On play, choose a character on your opponent's board, and you can stun it. That character cannot move to another position on the stage. So you can lock your standby opponent's big, scary targets in their back row, stop your opponent from being able to play their finishers early if they get rushed just to heal or get their effects. If you stun them, they can't move them up, and you effectively remove the card. There are a lot of ways to finesse that kind of effect, but the fact that it is stapled to a card that we would play anyway, since we want that instant selection, even though it comes at the cost of negging a card, is very, very powerful in NIKKE. We want to recur very specific effects over and over and over to lock our opponents out of things, as well as, again, clearing off a board spot so that you can play multiple Alices in one turn, which, even though that's taxing your hand, that's something that NIKKE typically starts to do when you go to level 2, is you're going to go down in hand to present a more powerful board, because it's all about slamming as many Alices as you can. Rounding out our level 0, I play 2 of the Delta. I think this is becoming a little bit more common, but I play this at 2 because I don't play the Twin Driver. I think the Twin Driver does absolutely nothing in the deck. You're not playing 8 standby. You have better cards to use as early stock out. Specifically, this Delta is a better early stock out, even when your grave is small, because on play, she also rearranges your top 2. That goes really far in sequencing your attacks in NIKKE. You see a standby on top, you move it down, you get that fatty standby to front row on your second attack. You get to put a biscuit out. That can be the difference in having a super crazy board or just a kind of okay board. And then, of course, this is just another card that lets you pick up cards from your grave, recur cards, filter heavy cards out, and then gives a little bit extra power, gives 1,000 power to another lane. I think if the deck was 8 standby, there'd be a little bit more value in that Twin Driver, but I think that card's just completely dead. I see no reason to play it. Kind of unique to my list, I choose to play one of the Red Hood Brainstorm. It's a self-tap salvage Brainstorm. It has a bunch of different on-play utility effects, but the most important one to me is that level 2, you can pay 1, ditch 1, and bounce a card. The fact that that's on a 0, that's also on a Brainstorm. I split this with the Jackal. A lot of lists play 4 Jackal. I play 3 Jackal, 1 Red Hood. And it also just gives you the opportunity that when you are cycling your back row, sometimes there are going to be times where you don't have 2 cards you want to tap, but you want to move more cards. Having that Red Hood in the list does give you the ability to do that. Her other utility effects are okay. If you're at level 1, you can pay 1, ditch 1, give your whole board a soul. You're at level 3, you burn your opponent 50, which just basically moves them to their next cancel, which might be relevant, but you also look at the top 4 card of your deck and add a card, so it gives you a little bit of like last ditch deck speed. Those are okay, but the bounce at level 2, where usually bounce is most relevant, again, sets that are trying to set something up at that level, that's when that's the most relevant. So that's the most important utility effect for me. You could also play the promo check 3 Brainstorm. That card's also really good. At the beginning of your climax phase, you get to check your top card, just put it back. Again, being able to inform your attack order in NIKKE is very, very powerful. Again, check to rearrange. Already talked about how powerful that could be. So having an effect like that be static on the board can be very strong. But again, the thing that brings me back to the Red Hood is because I'm cycling my back row in and out, if I have that check 3 Brainstorm down, I'm incentivized to keep it on the board. And NIKKE is a deck that rotates its back row very quickly. So that card won't get a lot of value. And there's a lot of other deck speed in the deck. I don't think I need a check 3 Brainstorm. I don't think I need better access to climaxes. I have Rappy draw ditching me pretty much every turn multiple times, so it's really not that big of a deal. And then lastly, I play one of the Scarlet Climax Swap. It's a deck Climax Swap, so you pay 1, go in your deck, grab a Climax, put a Climax back. That's kind of neither here nor there. You don't really care about switching Climaxes in NIKKE very, very much. You're kind of really pretty much content of just playing what you have. You just kind of put them a dirty out if you have door, standby something big out if you get the standby. But the most important part of this card that I really, really like is not only do you have that little bit of up inconsistency if you do need to like last ditch switch into the Biscuit Climax to burn some 4s, is her second effect, which is a free Clock Plus effect. When she dies, as long as you have another NIKKE character, you can put a blue character from the waiting room into the bottom of your clock, look at top 2, choose level 1 or lower card, it goes to hand. So that is a free stock plus on a card that also does something else pretty strong. But what I love about this is if I play it at level 0, going into my level 1, my opponent swings into me, it dies, I'm at level 1, I can set a Sin, a 3/2 Sin, the most important card to get on the board at level 2 as early as possible in NIKKE. I can set that Sin to the bottom of my clock at level 1 before I even do anything else. So it's guaranteed to be there when I hit level 2. Selection on it isn't very good, but again, it's just a flip and a free card and the ability to set our Sin, which is the most important part of the card to me. Moving into level 1, we have the Modernia combo. Pretty simple one here. It's a 102k. It's got a soul trigger. Then you got 2 or more of the NIKKE characters. It gets 4k. So it's a 106k, 7k with the climax. Then when you attack, as long as you have 2 or more other characters, you look at that top card of your deck, choose a level 1 or lower character in your waiting room, return it to your hand, and if that card was 2 or higher, put it into your stock. So this is a plus and a coin flip at a free stock, but again, we have our Rappy and we have that check 2 drop salvager. 2 easy ways to hedge our bets, even with multiple Modernias. Play multiple Rappys, bounce them back, give the effect to both of them. I've had turns and seen people have turns where they can set up enough checks and have enough information on the top of their deck without really expending a lot of those resources, since those Rappys are popping back, to hedge their bets on hitting a Modernia in every single lane, which can be pretty crazy because that extra stock that you have in NIKKE, you don't really care about your hand going to level 2 because your tap counter doesn't need hand. You only really need to be able to play your Alices every single turn. So having that extra stock to just sort of jam cards down, brainstorm to get extra cards, to then use those to funnel into playing more Alices, playing down a helmet, sacking it off, playing a second Alice on the same turn. Plays like that are really, really powerful, so that extra stock goes a long, long way. But yeah, pretty simple but very powerful card because of the Rappy and the check top rearrange effects that we have. I already mentioned the Jackal before, but there's a super unique brainstorm. It's one of the coolest parts of playing NIKKE. I really love this card. So during your turn, if all your characters NIKKE, this card gets 4k power, so she's a 7k base, and then you can pay 1 and rest 2 of your characters to brainstorm 5 and to search brainstorm. So you get that extra brainstorm, you get to tap down cards that are not her and then swing with her because she has a pretty respectable power line, 7k, 8k with climax. You got Rappy to bounce her at 9k. You have other ways to pump power, so even going into level 2, this card can kill things while also resting your back row down. You have Rappy, which is going to pop back to your hand. You have the helmet, which you don't mind sitting in the back row. You have your fat standby supports that do not have to tap for abilities or abilities that you really care about, so you can freely use them with a Rappy or a helmet while this card attacks in the front row, or you can just leave her in the back row and tap her with one of those cards, bounce the other one back, whatever, to save her for the next turn. Being a 5-card brainstorm is super, super strong. This is the main reason we're rotating our back row in and out, because we want to leverage this Jackal. Having that tap 2 brainstorm, this used to be sort of a detriment, but now that we have so much utility in Modern White Schwartz, the ability for cards to come back to our hand, clear themselves off the board, reuse them multiple times, being able to tap down characters multiple times a turn to mill more and more cards when necessary is very, very powerful. And especially when you're looking at extra cards here to generate more pluses, give you more cards to then funnel into having to mill in those situations. And I play the Elig anti-change counter. It's a level 1 ditch 2 memory anti-change counter. I don't like the NIKKE list that just play 2 3,500 counters that don't do anything. The 3,500 counter was a specific tech in JP aimed at Shiny Mass when it was relevant, and I don't think anybody really did the power lineups on that. It's not relevant at all. Just play the memory kick. But the reason I play the A-Leg is because honestly, I never going to go to an English event without one, because people still fall on it. People just fall on anti-change counter for absolutely no reason. It's 2025. We've been playing Weiss forever. There's absolutely no reason to be falling on anti-change counter the way people do, but they still do it, so I'm never going to go to an event without one. It also really helps you in the mirror in matchups where people are trying to fight your Alices with their own early plays. When they try to double early play or something like that, or you hit level 2 first, play your one Alice because you're at low clock, you hit your opponent into level 2 in a mirror or something like that. They try to play multiple Alices to stabilize. You have that fuck you to send their Alice to memory. They won't be able to replay it again, which is a big thing for NIKKE. So it's actually really, really nice in the mirror because you don't have to worry about beating an Alice with power. You can just get it out of there. Now, moving into level 2, these are all going to be like nasty tech cards, backups, things like that. There's only 4 of them, but we're going to start with the noise. I love this card. This is an on play, pay 1. This card gets 1,000 power until end of turn. Your opponent cannot play events from their hand until the end of their next turn. Because this effect happens in main phase when you play the card, that means they can't play event backups when you're going into your combat on that turn. So things like Bracelet, things like a event tap counter. And then furthermore, going into their turn, they can't play event cards that do powerful things in most sets. An example of that would be like the Bunny Girl Free Fresh event. You see that your opponent has not played the event yet. They're getting to low in deck. You're kind of playing a slow game with NIKKE, so you have more opportunities than not to make plays like this. You play down the noise, stop them from being able to play their free fresh. They take a point of damage that they weren't expecting. That's a big part of the Bunny Girl loop that keeps their compression up. The fact that they don't take refresh points because they're always able to play this event. And then you also hurt their selection. Well, that's a little bit more edge case. There are definitely events that your opponent will play in main phase that you want to shut down that are a lot more impactful. And while the tree isn't one of them, that's just more of a consistency piece that lets SDS flex their hand. Some SDS lists I've seen over on Weiss Tea Time are actually picking up this 3-1 event, which just removes a character on your board, sends it to memory. They obviously can't play that. And then decks that play event stock shuffles or stock swaps, Bang Dream on the horizon is going to be very powerful. We're going to have to play around Buds for Luck again. You can stop your opponent from stock swapping you. So just a lot of utility and a lot of just putting your opponent on edge. If they know what this card does, they see you pick it up, they think that they might not be able to play their events when they need to, might start misplaying. But more importantly, if they don't know what this card does, or they are not aware that you could shut down their events, you could just completely blow out a game. And it is super non-offensive to include because of her second effect. When this attacks, you have 4 more of the NIKKE characters. This card gets 4k power and the following abilities at the end of your opponent's next turn. The character facing this card cannot side attack. So this is like an additional quote-unquote level 3 that forces your opponent to front that plays into your tap counter. So the fact that it isn't a dead card, even when the anti-event, doesn't really matter because your opponent will at least be forced to front. They won't be able to play around your tap, and you only play this down for 1. Makes for leaner plays later in the game. That's something that you could do with this card. So it's not dead in the matchups that you don't need the anti-event, and the matchups that you do have the anti-event might just win you the game. And then I also play one of the Ludmilla Bouncer. This is on play. You choose 2 of your characters, give them 1,500 power, and then you can put this card into your stock, pop the bottom card of your stock, and choose one of your opponent's characters and return it to their hand. So they're trying to make it a little bit harder for you to replay these sack bouncers, but the fact that it goes to the top of your stock and you can just pay it out and then pick it back up with a helmet or something means that if you had to bounce multiple characters with this, it's really not that big of a deal. But the fact that it removes a character and then buffs 2 lanes by 1,500 power and then removes itself from the board, meaning that you could put this down, get the buff, tap it for a brainstorm with Jackal, then remove it, means you got a lot of flex with a bouncer like this. I really love these 2-1 bouncers as long as they have relevant second effects, no matter where they're sending themselves, so long as it's not to memory, just makes them all the more flexible for a card that's always been a little bit of an edge shot in Weiss. You don't always need a bouncer, but you're always happy to have it in the matchups when you need it. 2 more level 2. I'm playing one of the 2/2 Rosanna. This is a 1,500 frontal assist, and then you can tap it to look at your opponent's top 2 and put them back in any order. That sounds a lot nastier than it is. Realistically, all it does is if you see a climax and a clean card, you move the climax to the top so that you can ping it off or set up a side and then swing into a more likely swing to stick because you know at least the first damage is clean. Realistically, it doesn't come up that much. There are a lot of weird edge cases with it though, but more importantly, it's 1,500 to front. That will make your Modernia's 7/5 cross turn, which is pretty chunky for costless cards. It's the only level 1 quote-unquote standby target that I choose to play. I think the 2/2 hand on core 10k is a completely dead slot. I played with that card, played with that. I absolutely do not miss it. NIKKE, when you're talking about standby in NIKKE, it's really only when you hit level 2 that's when it matters, because that's when the sin comes out and that's when you actually start playing for power. So just have one of it in here as an option because, again, we mill so many cards on our first deck between the Chiuri, the Scarlet, the Jackal Brainstorm if we do that at level 1 before we go into our attacks. The likelihood that this is in our grave going to level 1 is a little bit higher than most decks at a 1 of. And I don't feel like dedicating 2 slots to the card because I don't think it's that important. outside of the mirror. If Door Standby NIKKE really took off and everybody was playing it, I would consider playing 2 of the Rosanna, because in the mirror it can make or break some power lines at level 2 when you combine it with the Sin. And then again, I already mentioned, but I play the memory kick counter. It's just a 3k counter to protect your Alices while also just removing your opponent's cards, getting them into memory that can't replay them. Edge cases against certain finishers, certain things that go end of attack. Never sad to have a memory kick in your deck, since it's just a 1 cost quote-unquote defensive counter in the right matchups. And again, the 3500 counter was only an angle shot against a very specific deck in JP that we don't have, so you might as well play the counter with an effect. There is also a 2/1 2500 counter, which is a +4 or +6 soul counter. I can't exactly remember, but that is something you could consider in this slot, another defensive counter to help keep you alive. But I've never really seen the need for it in this deck, especially because it further taxes your hand, and I'm already playing the anti-change counter, so I just like playing the memory kick. Getting into level 3s, the Alice early play is the name of the game. That is what Door Standby NIKKE is playing for, is this card. When you read it, it seems a little bit unassuming, but once this thing hits the board, Door Standby NIKKE really starts to take off. So it's a 4 or more early play. All your characters are NIKKE, gets 2k, so it's going to be 10k base. And then when your battle opponent becomes reverse, you can put that character on top of your opponent's deck. That is cross turn, so that's going to help you push extra damage on your successive attacks after Alice. Remove cards that have sticky effects like Hand Encore, get them off the board, put them on top of their deck as damage. And since it's cross turn, give you the ability to manipulate your opponent's triggers if you can get the reverse on their turn. So say they are forced for some reason due to their lines to crash into you with a level 0 in one of your Alice lanes to generate stock. You can then mess with their numbers to, if it's your last attack and you say you're at 3-4 and you can't take a 3, they crash in with a card before this, and you could put a clean trigger on top of their deck. You know they won't be swinging for 3, they can only swing for 2. Situations like that, it does come up. It's something you're more for your opponent to play around than for you to consciously play into, but it's just something to remember once Alice is down on the board. But you're mostly going to be using this to push extra damage, remove nasty cards that try to stick around, and just constantly be putting their opponent's cards right on top of their deck. And then leaning into the defensive end of the deck, she is a healer. When you play this, you ditch a character from your hand and return the top card of your clock to your hand. That could be really nice going to refresh. If you clock a standby or even a door or something like that, you can just discard a character and pick it right back up. Have had times I've even used the Scarlet to put a character from my stock that I knew was there into my clock and then pick it up with Alice when I'm sort of at low clock. That's not usually a play that you normally want to do at level 2 since you're taking damage, even though you're going to heal it off. But if you need that specific card, that's a way to do it. But yeah, just being able to spam out multiples of these using your helmet and other ways to clear your field and get your cards back, since it's a 4 or more early play, means that you can continually slam down multiple lanes of Alice, and that's when she really starts to get crazy, because you're top decking 2 cards in your opponent's turn. That means you're swinging for quote-unquote 1 less damage in every lane. Since you're top decking clean cards on the top of your opponent's deck, it means that you're not over swinging as much. So even though Door Standby NIKKE doesn't run any true decompression tools, the fact that Alice kind of like -1s her damage, but it still sticks going into the successive attacks, helps you keep up in the damage game, even if your opponent starts to get really compressed. And then almost as important as the Alice is the Sin support. Note that this is a blue card. We're only playing 3 blue cards, so we can only bring this out on the board realistically with Standby. But that doesn't really matter since none of her abilities are on play. She's a 1500 global assist, and at the beginning of your opponent's draw phase, you can pay 5, choose one of your opponent's level 3 or lower standing characters, rest it, and then deal X damage to your opponent, where X is equal to that character's soul. So if your opponent tries to play a finisher early to heal down or something of that nature, they have it hanging out on their board. They have some kind of support back there that typically doesn't tap for an effect. You can rest it, get that little bit of extra chip damage, maybe stop them from brainstorming or something of that nature, but you're mostly going to use this to chip your opponent out at endgame. Because your other effects mostly have to do with hand and start to save themselves on stock going into the end game, especially since your tap counter is free. The fact that you are going to be able to chip your opponent to death with this on the end of turn after all of your effects means that you effectively, even if they only have a 1 soul character on their board with this, means that you have to do 1 less damage to kill. And since NIKKE doesn't do a lot of damage in its main phase, doesn't have a lot of extra ways to push extra damage, even though the Alice is consistently helping you stack it up, having that little bit of extra chip to get there in the end is super, super nice. Another one of the big ways that you can use this is to play around stock swap. So going into your opponent's turn, if you have a lot of stock and you expect that you're about to be stock swapped, you can pay 5 at the beginning of your opponent's draw phase, take your stock out, make that stock swap a lot worse for them and a lot better for you. Also, of course, if you trigger a lot going into the bottom of your deck, you had to gamble on a low deck state, one of those bad situations, you can immediately pay all of those out without having to crash an encore character. There are a lot of ways to finesse this effect, but just keep in mind that it's a big stock out at the beginning of your opponent's turn. They can also do that little bit of extra 1 or 2 damage to get you there in the end. And then most importantly, she's also a global 15, making your Alices a lot chunkier and keeping them alive so that they can keep reversing stuff and putting damage on top of your opponent's deck. Now, the other climax combo that we play in Door Standby NIKKE is the Biscuit. So we're playing 4 of her standby. We're only playing 2 of the Biscuit herself because it's sort of like a gravy card. It's not really something that we're playing to put on the board with standby immediately of level 2. We're really just trying to put the Alices down, get the Sin out, and then if we trigger another standby, then we'll put the Biscuit down if we have it. And a big reason she's really good to put in front row off a second standby is that she's really sticky. She's bigger than Alice at a base 10-5 and also has hand encore. And then once she sticks around, when she attacks on the next turn, you can discard any card to heal the top card of your clock into the waiting room. So even more reason not to play her from hand. And then on attack with the standby, if you ever need to, you can pay 1, ditch 1, and as long as you have 2 other characters, you can burn 4. So that's sort of your end game Hail Mary. You almost never do that effect, but if you have to push extra damage, you do have the ability to do it at no extra real cost to you to include this card. We are always going to play the standby to get our big things out at level 2, and the fact this is also a passive healer. Every turn it sticks on the board, we can start throwing our hand to make sure we stabilize the game, and this card also has hand encore, able to stick around. And lastly, we have the Modernia tap counter package. So the 3-2 over here is an Icy Tail. So when it attacks, you can ditch 2, mill your opponent's bottom 4, burn for the number of climaxes. Nothing too special there. But on play, you choose another character in your hand, put it at any position of your stage, and that character gets 2,000 power. So the fact that this is an elbow drop that buffs the character that it summons rather than buffing itself means that we can obviously drop down an Alice to make it even bigger to reverse one of our opponent's lanes, stacking that card on top, giving us extra damage, quote unquote, on our finisher turns where we have to use this Modernia effect. So she saves us stock, putting down 2 level 3s, and then enables her 3-0 tap counter. So this card has 2 effects. The first one is a plus soul effect. It's not great. You have to mandatorily draw and then discard a card before giving a character plus 6 soul, and then this card goes to your clock. So you have to blind filter and clock this card to give something plus 6 soul. But if for some reason you could never get the Modernia over here onto the board and you've had this card running in your hand, it's nice that it still does have a Hail Mary defensive effect. But the more important part of the card is that you choose one of these 3-2 Modernias that you have on your field, put it into your memory, and then you can look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put them back in any order, and tap one of your opponent's characters. So it is a 3-0 tap counter, provided you have this Modernia on the board somewhere. So you can stand by it if you're at level 2 and you already have this card in your hand and you know your opponent's going to go to 3 first, you can set that up, or you can play it down at level 3, which is more common, and then have this if you don't finish your opponent, since NIKKE doesn't have a lot of finishing power in this deck specifically. So we're going to play into putting down the Modernia, maybe doing the Icy Tail, since we only have to have this 3-0 in our hand to do the tap. We don't have any other cost since our Modernia is on the board. And then tap our opponent down and go for a second turn kill. Even at just a 2-2 count here, this is super consistent with those extra draws off Rappy that you're going to do all throughout the game. The second that you see this tap counter, anytime pretty much after your mulligan, you're going to try to hold on to it if you can. And NIKKE's pretty good at flexing its hand and things of that nature, since you have a lot of cards with a lot of utility that are going to come back to your hand. So you're not going to be hurting to kind of play on a quote-unquote 6-card hand to keep this thing around even as early as level 1. Like I said at the beginning of the video, it's not common that we get a deck in Weiss like this that's truly this control-y. It's very rewarding to pilot decks like that, since you are actively trying to shut down your opponent in new matchups that you might play, especially locals where you're playing mixed and you have no idea what people are coming out with. You have all these different tools that you can try to shut your opponent down with and control the game as well as you can, no matter what matchup. But going into the meta, I think NIKKE is pretty well positioned. In terms of a defensive deck, it's going to have those issues against a deck that's so much of a monster like Bunny Girl. But the merits and strength of the defensive package with how strong the Alice early play is, having that free tap counter, the Sin being able to burn your opponents on their draw step, having this whole suite of defensive nasty tech, and then just having a super solid level 0 and level 1 makes for a really powerful deck, even if it is defensively slanted, which isn't everybody's jam in Weiss. But even if it's not the kind of deck that you typically play, I implore you to try this one out. The whole process of manipulating your board and cycling out your back row makes this a lot more engaging than other standby defensive decks that kind of just slam stuff onto the board and sit on them all the time. The fact that you're actively rotating your board around and pulling off effects and things of that nature and playing towards a very explicit kind of board at level 2 means that even with only 4 standbys, the fact that you have the Rappy and all this other consistency, making sure that you draw drop and get into the right stuff at the right times, means that you can set up some pretty nasty boards if you play into it, even with only 4 of that standby climax. Since of course you got that extra stock from the Modernia, giving you that leeway to set yourself up. With this deck being how it is, being very control-y and having singular kind of blowout like anti-techs and having these weird effects to trigger at times that people are not used to, such as draw phase, this is something that I absolutely wanted to cover with Summerfest going on, because when you hit this deck, if you're not familiar with those things, this deck can absolutely run you over if you're not prepared for it. So it's absolutely one that I wanted to cover, and one that I absolutely expect to see going not only into Summerfest but also into fall. NIKKE is a super popular property. It was super well opened, so cards are very available. I believe there's even a possible second print on the way, and the deck has not only this very strong defensive deck, but also many other variants that you could play, such as the crazy blowout finisher decks that I'm not very fond of, but many people enjoy. And with that, we're going to wrap up here. I know there's been a bit of a drought of content. I have been unbelievably busy, and I've been trying to reapproach how I am going to make videos going forward. So instead of just making content for content's sake, just sort of cranking out a deck tech every week, cranking out these set reviews and things of that nature, I want to make content when I want to cover something that I think people should know about, something that I really want to talk about, and some of that might be competitive theory stuff, some of that might be tournament reports, tournament vlogs, things of that nature. So in terms of content regularity, that might go down, but I hope that stuff that I do make is not only of higher quality, more well thought out, but also have more intent behind it. So it's not just kind of churning content week by week, since that's sort of just not where I want to go with the channel as it's evolved and in its current state. But anyway, be on the lookout for more stuff. There is more stuff coming, and it's not going to be that weird or that out there or that infrequent or anything like that. I'm just being cautious and announcing my current plans going forward. But in terms of upcoming events, I will see you all at Chicago and Philly Summerfest this season, as well as the Ohio Summer Solstice, which is happening at the end of July. And with that, Pittsburgh White Schwartz signing off, and I'll see you in the next one.